Thank you. Thank you, Lady Ashley. Quick change. Now we're back in the interview room, or I'm back in the interview room. I've got my friend Lindsey here. Why don't you introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Lindsey Clark. I work for the Human Rights Campaign. I've been there for 6 years. My pronouns are they, them, their. From Ohio.
Okay.
That's a good start.
That's a good start.
Who I am as a human.
Yes. I'll just bring it out right now. Yes, this human said the HRC. Lindsey works with the HRC, and the HRC is one of our donating sponsors this year. This is a first for our organization. HRC. Let's talk about it.
Okay.
Right.
Let's talk about
Because it's complicated, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's not just as easy, like, oh, yay, it's all good. But, you know, I believe in our movement, and I believe as a human being that we evolve, we change, we do better when we know better, and we are under attack in so many ways.
Oh, yeah, you'll have to tell me, my friend.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's been a hard time.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I have conversations about HRC and the complications of HRC a lot, as I'm sure you can imagine. As I said, I've worked there for 6 years, coming around on 7 though. I started in 2013, and HRC had a couple of really high-profile mistakes early in, well, not early in their life, but early in my knowing about HRC. And before my time there, but in a way that has influenced the whole time that I've worked there.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it's been a learning experience. As somebody who is trans and non-binary working at HRC, I think that that's a whole other level to it that I wasn't ready for or expecting. And so I think that sometimes it's a little easier for me to walk into rooms and talk to folks than maybe it is for some of our other staff. But we still do get, a fair amount of pushback in a lot of the community rooms that we walk into.
Sure.
Yeah.
And how do you prepare yourselves for these hard conversations?
Practice.
Yeah.
It's something that I think, has been such a cornerstone of my work. There's a lot of people who work at HRC and they do a lot of different things. But my work primarily, we used to call our team the field team, and now we're called the campaigns and organizing team.
Okay.
So fancy.
Yes.
But we're basically the grassroots part of HRC. And so we do the on-the-ground work with our steering committees that we have across the country. We have 32 committees of volunteers that run most of our local work for us. And then there are folks like me who cover the state work and some of the federal work that happens in states. So just for example, I cover 7 states for HRC. Yeah.
So that's a lot of travel.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm getting pretty good at, squeezing through TSA. But yeah, it's been a beautiful, beautiful 7 years, and I've really enjoyed it. And, it is a really hard part of the work to talk about this big mistake that I recognize was an enormous mistake and that still has ripple effects for our community to this day. And, being a member of the trans community, I think all the time about sort of the background trauma that's happening right now for us. Like the way that this administration, and even before that, like just the social isolation and the family separations, and it's just, there's always this sort of low-level trauma. And so when someone who's meant to be your ally, meant to be someone who's with you and for you, isn't with you and for you, it's something that I could understand why it would take a really long time to come around after something like that. And so, we have conversations in community and we talk about how to rebuild trust and how to try to find ways to perform and get stuff done to try to help rebuild that trust.
Right.
And until, relatively recently, I think our focus was a lot more on the state level and the federal level work. But as you know, we have a new president.
Yes.
Yes, Alfonso David, who joined us very recently. I'm not as up on his count of days as he is, but he could tell you exactly how many days he's worked here.
Right.
Yeah, just a little over 100 days he's been with us.
Wow.
And I think one of the things that I really appreciate about Alfonso is the way that he approaches the work from, yes, we have to do this high-level federal work. We have to throw around the weight that we have in the spaces that we can get into and have access to. And, folks in community are suffering and dying today. And he feels it, and I think he understands it in a way that I was really hopeful that the next president of HRC was going to carry, and I think he carries it, and he carries it well. And he understands the difference between fighting for equality and fighting for equity in a way that I think is really important.
Yeah.
You know, we've been doing good work in the trans community for the whole time that I've worked at HRC. A lot of that work has been work that is for the queer community en masse. And so it's not specific, unless our opponents are coming at us with very specific attacks. Sometimes our work isn't specific. It's non-discrimination protection for the full queer community on sexual orientation and gender identity. Or, you know, we're fighting back panic defenses that fall on both sides. Or, you know, we're doing work that extends across the whole queer community. Alfonso's plan is a trans justice initiative that raises our trans work out of the general queer work and puts it on a different level that I think then will allow us to get to better places and get more traction. Because we're taking an equitable approach instead of trying to fight for equality. Does that make sense?
It does. Well, I mean, how's that going to manifest, though, right? Like, it sounds, it's beautiful. It sounds like great words.
Yes.
So what does the manifestation of that look like?
Yeah, so far, the way that Alfonso's been talking about the Trans Justice Initiative is a few things. So one part of it is that we started a program called Elevate that was specifically a paid fellowship program for trans women of color within healthcare spaces to raise the level of training that folks have and to try to help the folks who are already doing the work to get the skills to do it even better.
Okay.
And then he after community meetings like the one we sat through, he decided to do something similar in a program called Activate, but that focuses on leaders within community organizations, within nonprofits who are doing this work the way that we do.
Yeah.
And so, so those fellows have just started, and we'll work through 2020. And then he's also talked about doing a partnership with an organization called Trans Can Work. They're out of California.
Okay.
And they basically do training and career development work and job fairs for trans folks and trans expansive folks to try and get sort of better placement within jobs.
Okay.
You know, a lot of the work that we do right now around corporate equality or some of our other programs, they really are about making sure that the workplace is as safe as possible once you're in it, right? And this work of, you know, doing a tour and doing job fairs and doing training and doing smarter placement, hopefully that will help folks to find the right job that they can be successful in. Because the last thing that you want to do is, you know, pull your corporate partners in and then pull the folks in who need work and just match them up in ways they can't be successful.
Yeah.
And so that's one of the programs that he's pretty excited about. And then the last thing is that we've talked about doing task forces in some of the cities where violence has been the highest. You know, violence is pretty prevalent against Black trans women across the whole country.
Yes.
And we know that there are some places where it's at a higher rate than other spots.
Yeah.
You have one of those in state here in Missouri. And so looking at places where the violence is high and municipal government might be willing to work, or there are already queer organizations that have been working with enforcement agencies and just trying to figure out ways to bring tables of folks together to use that access we were talking about to try and create spaces that maybe just haven't existed before. And he's still listening. You know, he's still doing the work of going around to the communities and having these community meetings and trying to figure out how to serve local communities, and some things are the same and some things aren't. You know, we very recently did a meeting in Chicago, and it was similar to the meeting that we did here in St. Louis, but not exactly the same. And so I think that listening tour will continue, and I hope that, you know, after he comes out of more meetings and more conversations, that we'll find even more ways to lift up the folks who are already doing the work. Because that's really what we're being asked for. And it used to be a lot of asks about money specifically.
Yes. Which
is important, and we have much more of than most of the local partners that we work with, and it's not a sustainable way for us to support when, you know, even just in my states, we're talking about dozens of organizations that I'm trying to partner with and trying to work with, and so I think we're getting to solutions that will help us to really start to perform and get results for our local partners which then I think should help to rebuild some of that trust and hopefully make all the work that moves forward even stronger.
Yeah, I mean, I'm hopeful, right? I'm hopeful that you come in as partners, as listening and supporting the work that's already been doing and help organizations create stronger structure.
Yeah.
I've loved the index of businesses that are highly ranked with HRC. Like, this is a great place to work. And I think, wow, that would be a great place to work if I could get my foot in there.
Yeah.
My foot. But yeah, so I like that idea, that initiative. And, you know, I think it's a wait and see approach. Like, I went to the meeting with him and I liked what he had to say.
Yeah.
And I felt like it was genuine and true. And y'all's gala's pretty fancy.
It is.
You can raise a whole lot of money in just a few hours. I mean, that's impressive.
I have nothing to do with the galas, but geez, are they fun.
They're fancy. So tell me this. When did the HRC, as a queer, come on your radar first off?
So it was the stickers, which is,
Those blue
I know, which is just, it's so many people's story, but it's true.
It's true, yes.
So I said that I was from Ohio. What I didn't say is that I'm from a super, super rural part of Ohio, very, very small town. And so I was the only queer person I knew for much of my youth. And when I found out what the little blue sticker with the equal sign meant, it was just like this weird little, like, shelter in the storm kind of situation where you could see it at the grocery store or you could see it, you know, in a school parking lot somewhere, and you just knew that there was an ally.
Yeah.
Right? Like, there's somebody, maybe they're not queer, but maybe they just know enough to be a much better ally than I'm finding in most of the community.
Yes.
And so, yeah, so I think for most people, that's the first way that they come in contact, which is a testament to our brand managers. And then, you know, so the way that I came in contact with HRC through work was that I was a freelance organizer. After college, I did some issue campaigns when those were happening much more frequently, ballot campaigns and legislative stuff. And one of those was the marriage fight in Illinois.
Okay.
And so I moved to Chicago after college, and I got involved in that campaign, and I was with them for the full 9 months, and the person who managed me in that campaign worked at HRC, and she became my manager when I became a full-time worker at HRC.
Okay.
So that's how I came into their space through a work lens. And I don't know that I ever put together the logo and the name until then. I went to Canada for college, so I was sort of outside of the purview for a while. But yeah, I think that was really the first time that I put it all together.
Yeah.
In the campaign. Yeah.
It is. I know many a queer that was sort of a little beacon. If you see somebody driving down the street or in a parking lot, I reckon it, maybe Christian folks who see those little fishes on the back of people's cars feel that sort of kindred.
Might feel the same.
Maybe feel that kindred spirit. They were definitely little beacons for me as a young human. And when I first came out as trans, I came out to my church, which is a Unitarian Universalist church in Alton, and the pastor called the HRC. This would have been 11 years ago, and the HRC sent out a human to train our congregation on how to love on me.
Nice.
And so that was my real ground zero with the HRC. And so, you know, then when decisions had been made that were stinging to me as a transgender person, it stung extra because they had been so tender and kind to me in my coming out. And but I do appreciate that, and I feel like so much of this movement is both and.
Yeah.
You know, like I can hold sacred that human came and taught my congregation how to love on me and in a sweet, dear way, and they've made some mistakes in hurting folks and co-opting things, and so. It's both and I'm going to lean in with this new leadership that it can be more of this, right?
I appreciate that. Me too.
And I you know, I'm going to say too, part of it was the work you're doing with promo. That's some powerful stuff. Yeah. You want to talk about that?
Sure.
Yeah.
So I actually got my start in Missouri in 2015. I don't know if this would have caught your radar, but the Springfield campaign that happened?
Yes.
A little bit?
Yeah,
okay.
Little bit, yeah.
There was a municipal ordinance that passed in Springfield to protect sexual orientation and gender identity, and our opponents came at us hard in Springfield and appealed it to the ballot, so then it was going to be a ballot campaign, and I was called to come and be the field director for that campaign.
Okay.
And we had done campaigns like that in some cities, never in a place where the polling looked the way that Springfield looked when we got there. I love Springfield deeply. I love people who live in Springfield deeply, and it's a very white place. I think their voting demographic is older than in most places, and it's also the international headquarters of the Assemblies of God. And
I didn't know that.
Yes, I didn't either until I was there. And so what we decided was that, you know, traditional campaign work just wasn't going to get us there. And so we decided to try deep canvassing, which is something that we started doing as a result of work that the Leadership Lab in LA was doing around marriage.
Yeah.
But we'd never really done it all the way with trans stuff this way on the ballot. And so it was an experiment, and we made up so much of the distance and didn't get it all the way there, and it was just heartbreaking. And being in the room that night when they announced that, you know, we hadn't won, people didn't leave. Like, I don't know if you've ever been in a party where the candidate doesn't win or the initiative doesn't win, but people usually leave right away. People are sad, they want to go home, they just want to get out of there. And people stayed, and they hugged each other, and they loved on each other, and it was just so different. And so Steph, who works at Promo, was there, is from, at that point was living in Springfield. And so he came to me, I guess this was last year sometime, he came to me and said that he wanted to do something in Missouri to try to shift the tide, and that he really believed in that deep canvassing work.
Yeah.
And he thought that maybe there was a way for us to do that here, more evergreen, not with a ballot initiative, but just to see if we could do prejudice reduction just at a time when we wanted to do it.
Let's pause and just describe deep canvassing.
Sure.
Folks that might not know what that is.
Yeah, totally. So if you've ever knocked doors or made phone calls, usually they're pretty quick.
Yeah.
You talk to people about either the issue that you're working on or the candidate that you're working on, and it's usually just sort of testing where people are, marking them down, and then later you come back to turn them out to vote, or you never call them again, and that's kind of the way it works. With deep canvassing, you go, and these conversations are supposed to be in the 15 to 30 minute range.
Okay.
And you're having conversations and telling your story about being a human and being queer.
Yeah.
And you're trying to tie that back to the experiences of the human who's on the other end of the line, and trying to help them to see your humanity.
Right.
And that's a lot, and that seems scary, but it works.
Yeah.
And it works at an incredible rate. In marriage, we were seeing moves on cold calls at about 20%.
Wow.
So 1 in 5 strangers, we would have this conversation, they would change their mind about marriage by the end.
Wow.
So we've been doing that project now for months here in St. Louis and in Springfield. And that, I mean, it continues to work. Some things have changed. You know, fewer people have a landline, and so
Sure.
that makes it a little harder.
Yep.
And I think as a country, our discourse has changed across difference.
Yeah.
But it's still working. You know, we're still having these conversations with folks who they've never talked about trans people to trans people or the people who love them. And so it's just a really different conversation. And it's a super beautiful way to get allies in the mix for trans folks, you know?
Sure.
There have been days where I can't make those calls as a trans person. Like, there's just too much that's been happening. That background trauma we talked about has been too much.
Yeah.
But to watch, you know, the parents of a trans kid come in and have this conversation, or just an ally, just somebody who really cares about it, come in and use, you know, their privilege in that way to have that conversation is super beautiful and really moving to see in person.
Yeah.
So yeah, we're really proud of it, and I hope that we'll be able to do it in more places. I think we got lucky that Steph had seen it before, and so it wasn't a super scary pitch. But yeah, it's been a fun ride, and yeah, really proud of it.
Right on. So how much longer are you going to be doing that?
So right now, the program is supposed to go through the middle of this next year.
Wow.
And yeah, most of that decision was just trying to figure out, like, how long could we keep people excited before they were going to jump for the election.
Yeah.
And so we may have to reevaluate that, but it's also something that you could return to, and it builds skills for elections or for other work. You know, when you're on the phone and having these conversations, the other kinds of candidate conversations we try to have seem really easy. And so, so we're building a group of folks who can pretty easily do those other things, and it's something that you don't have to wait for election time to do. So I'm hopeful this won't be the last time we're doing it. I'm hopeful this will continue. This might be the first time Steph is hearing that. Sorry, Steph. But I'm really hopeful this will carry over.
Right on.
Yeah.
Well, it's been a pleasure.
Oh, thank you.
I appreciate it. And we are giving folks who are coming and sitting a little bit of a hot seat, but I think it was a good hot seat.
It wasn't that hot, honestly. It was totally fine.
So this is for you.
Oh, thank you.
And the HRC, right? Intention is so much, and so your support is vital to our liberation. We give these limited edition prints to all of our guests that we interview, and this is this year's, and this is for you to keep.
Thank you.
I appreciate your time and your energy and your work for our liberation and for our movement, and
thank you.
Hope we get to
and you too.
know each other better, right?
I think you're doing really hard work and very local work, and we need you. We need partners like you. So I'm super glad to be here.
Right on. All right, y'all, we're sending it back to the big room. Thank you.